Good afternoon. In New York City, I am Patricia Angelin, and you are at All the Feels at Alba Technique. And here I am saying hello to you and thanking you for being with me. It's a very gray day here in New York, very typical for December. And today I want to share with you some thoughts that I was having since yesterday, which was Pearl Harbor Day. And the people were talking about the last of the people who experienced Pearl Harbor are, of course, living. Some of them are still living, but every year there are fewer and fewer. And only those who are of a very great age only those of a very great age are still with us. Because a dear friend of mine wrote to me from Seattle a story about his father being in the Navy, which I did recall, but I didn't know that he was in Pearl Harbor on the day that the Empire of Japan did the surprise attack on the United States fleet of the Pacific. So I thought, how can we honor that and honor them and honor us all? Because, death comes for all of us. And these days with our feelings, it's as though there's not supposed to be death, but of course there is, and we will all die. But it's really an insult to the human mind and the human heart and all of our feelings. So I thought, in our poetry series, let me not shy away from this and from what so many of us experience and have experienced over time, and what all of us will experience, whether it's coming very, very close to it, as I have done a couple of times in my own life, or having lost other persons, and the letting go process in regards to grief and death and the full encountering of it, which is not a negative thing, it's a positive thing. So I thought, who better to assist us with this than the very great poet of the 19th century American, Emily Dickinson, whose poetry I do not really know as well as I wanted to. So I thought I would offer to you 3 of her poems that perhaps aren't known to you, and were certainly not known to me. When I skimmed them first over, I went, ooh, I don't know these. I can approach them almost as though they're completely new to me with you. So as usual, I turn the camera around so that you can simply listen to her great words. But the density of what she writes is such that I do think that they're meant to be seen and read out loud by you to yourself while you're looking at them as well. So let's consider this to be your first encounter or coming back to these poems if they're old friends of yours. And then I would suggest to you that you go ahead and pull out the book from your shelf that contains her work, or go online. It's so easy to just Google Emily Dickinson and find her poems. So there are going to be 3 and possibly 4 if we're in the mood. So here we are with something beautiful to look at, carnations, and the beautiful quote from Goethe: "One ought at least to hear a little melody every day, read a fine poem, see a good picture, and, if possible, make a few sensible remarks." So here's the order of them that kind of made sense to me. The first is, "After great pain, a formal feeling comes," by Emily Dickinson. After great pain, a formal feeling comes. The nerves sit ceremonious like tombs. The stiff heart questions, was it he that bore, and yesterday or centuries before, the feet, mechanical, go round a wooden way of ground or air or aught, regardless grown. A quartz contentment like a stone. This is the hour of lead, remembered, if outlived, as freezing persons recollect the snow, first chill, then stupor, then letting go. That was After Great Pain, A Formal Feeling by Emily Dickinson. The next is another by Emily Dickinson, also not as well known. Also, I think, written from within her feelings of deep depression when she was having mechanical and wooden and stone quartz-like feeling like in the first poem described. She clearly struggled very much at various points with aspects of depression. As most of us know, she had an agoraphobia as well. So most of these things she was dealing with on her own and with her own mind and heart. The poem is entitled Banish Air from Air. Banish air from air. Divide light if you dare. They'll meet while cubes in a drop or pellets of shape fit. Films cannot annul. Odors return whole. Force flame. And with a blonde push over your impotence, flit steam. As I did read that, it surprised me with how much anger was in it. I think that's interesting. And often what one finds when one does what a lot of my Protestant friends do, they will open up Holy Scriptures, at random and put their finger down with eyes closed and then read and mull over a piece of Holy Scripture. Well, I guess what we're doing is something like that, but not quite. So since it is about Pearl Harbor and about the generation that is passing for us today and our feelings of all the feels, there are two more that are in a book that I've had for a long time, and they're under the heading Death. So this one is The Morning After Death. And that's mourning as in the day after, not mourning as in grief. The Morning After Death. The bustle in a house, the morning after death, is solemnest of industries enacted upon earth. The sweeping up the heart and putting love away, we shall not want to use again until eternity. I've seen a dying eye. I've seen a dying eye run round and round a room in search of something, as it seemed, then cloudier become, and then obscure with fog, and then be soldered down, without disclosing what it be. 'Twere blessed to have seen. So clearly she had attended death before. And there we are. So the last generation is leaving us. The generation of Pearl Harbor. And I heard a news anchor worrying about whether we would all forget. Well, some of us will. It will depend upon our temperaments. But like the Shoah, there are those of us who do have a sense of history, who do read history, who do understand that pandemics have happened in cycles over time, and that this is not the first time humanity has dealt with pandemic. And Pearl Harbor was not the first time human beings have dealt with war and siege, and alas, will not be the last, because we do not accept ourselves, much less each other. And this affects our feelings, and it makes us angry, and it causes us to call others other with a capital O. And if you would take a look at last week's Facebook Live, now I'm sure on YouTube, and I'll check with my assistant when I meet with her in a few minutes to make sure that it did go up. I was talking about the oneness, and it's entitled on the YouTube page, Donne, D-O-N-N-E, Donne, as in John Donne, the poet, and Merton, and his talking about oneness. So it does seem, the day after Pearl Harbor, kind of fitting that Emily Dickinson, who is so dense in her imagery, that she clearly bears going back to and back to and back to, with so much for our human heart, with so much for our human feelings to feel and experience. If you have any comments on these poems, these 4 that I read to you, I would be very grateful to hear. If you have any requests for something that you would like to hear in this series of reading a fine poem at the diktat of Goethe, I would be very, very happy to hear it. And until next week on Facebook Live, or at your convenience on the Alba Technique YouTube channel, I am Patricia Angelin for Alba Technique, and you are listening to All the Feels. Thank you.